Bulgaria. Coordinates, 42 degrees 45 and 25 degrees 30 E, 42.750 degrees north 25.500 degrees east, 42.750, 25.500. Bulgaria, /BL listen, Bulgarian, romanized, BʌlGɛəriə, officially the Republic of Bulgaria, Bulgarian, tr. Republika Bǎlgariya, IPA, is a country in Southeast Europe. It is bordered by Romania to the north, Serbia and North Macedonia to the west, Greece and Turkey to the south, and the Black Sea to the east. The capital and largest city is Sofia. Other major cities are Plovdiv, Varna, and Burgas. With a territory of 110,994 square kilometers, 42,855 square miles, Bulgaria is Europe's 16th largest country. One of the earliest societies in the lands of modern-day Bulgaria was the Neolithic Koranovo culture, which dates back to 6500 BC. In the 6th to 3rd century BC, the region was a battleground for Thracians, Persians, Celts and ancient Macedonians. Stability came when the Roman Empire conquered the region in AD 45. The Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire lost some of these territories to an invading Bulgar horde in the late 7th century. The Bulgars founded the First Bulgarian Empire in AD 681, which dominated most of the Balkans and significantly influenced Slavic cultures by developing the Cyrillic script. This state lasted until the early 11th century, when Byzantine Emperor Basil II conquered and dismantled it. A successful Bulgarian revolt in 1185 established a Second Bulgarian Empire, which reached its apex under Ivanos in 1218–1241. After numerous exhausting wars and feudal strife, the Second Bulgarian Empire disintegrated in 1396 and its territories fell under Ottoman rule for nearly 5 centuries. The Russo-Turkish War of 1877–78 resulted in the formation of the current Third Bulgarian state. Many ethnic Bulgarian populations were left outside its borders, which led to several conflicts with its neighbors and an alliance with Germany in both world wars. In 1946, Bulgaria became a one-party socialist state and part of the Soviet-led Eastern Bloc. The ruling Communist Party gave up its monopoly on power after the revolutions of 1989 and allowed multi-party elections. Bulgaria then transitioned into a democracy and a market-based economy. Since adopting a democratic constitution in 1991, the sovereign state has been a unitary parliamentary republic with a high degree of political, administrative, and economic centralization. The population of 7 million lives mainly in Sofia and the capital cities of the 27 provinces. The population has declined since the late 1980s. Bulgaria is a member of the European Union, NATO, and the Council of Europe. It is a founding state of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and has taken a seat on the UN Security Council 3 times. Its market economy is part of the European single market and mostly relies on services, followed by industry, especially machine building and mining, and agriculture. Widespread corruption is a major socio-economic issue. It ranked as the most corrupt country in the European Union for 2018. Etymology. The name Bulgaria is derived from the Bulgars, a tribe of Turkic origin that founded the country. Their name is not completely understood and is difficult to trace back earlier than the 4th century AD, but it is possibly derived from the Proto-Turkic word bulga, to mix, shake, stir, and its derivative bulgak, revolt, disorder. The meaning may be further extended to rebel, incite or produce a state of disorder, and so, in the derivative, the disturbers. Ethnic groups in Inner Asia with phonologically similar names were frequently described in similar terms. During the 4th century, the Buluoji, a component of the 5 barbarian groups in ancient China, were portrayed as both a mixed race and troublemakers. History. Prehistory and Antiquity. Neanderthal remains dating to around 150,000 years ago, or the Middle Paleolithic, are some of the earliest traces of human activity in the lands of modern Bulgaria. The Koranovo culture arose circa 6500 BC and was one of several Neolithic societies in the region that thrived on agriculture. The Copper Age Varna culture, 5th millennium BC, is credited with inventing gold metallurgy. The associated Varna necropolis treasure contains the oldest golden jewelry in the world with an approximate age of over 6,000 years. The treasure has been valuable for understanding social hierarchy and stratification in the earliest European societies. The Thracians, one of the three primary ancestral groups of modern Bulgarians, appeared on the Balkan Peninsula sometime before the 12th century BC. The Thracians excelled in metallurgy and gave the Greeks the Orphean and Dionysian cults, but remained tribal and stateless. The Persian Achaemenid Empire conquered most of present-day Bulgaria in the 6th century BC and retained control over the region until 479 BC. The invasion became a catalyst for Thracian unity, and the bulk of their tribes united under King Teres to form the Odrysian kingdom in the 470s BC. It was weakened and vassalized by Philip II of Macedon in 341 BC, attacked by Celts in the 3rd century, and finally became a province of the Roman Empire in AD 45. By the end of the 1st century AD, Roman governance was established over the entire Balkan Peninsula and Christianity began spreading in the region around the 4th century. The Gothic Bible, the first Germanic language book, was created by Gothic bishop Ulfilas in what is today northern Bulgaria around 381. The region came under Byzantine control after the fall of Rome in 476. The Byzantines were engaged in prolonged warfare against Persia and could not defend their Balkan territories from barbarian incursions. This enabled the Slavs to enter the Balkan Peninsula as marauders, primarily through an area between the Danube River and the Balkan Mountains known as Moesia. Gradually, the interior of the peninsula became a country of the South Slavs, who lived under a democracy. The Slavs assimilated the partially Hellenized, Romanized, and Gothicized Thracians in the rural areas. First Bulgarian Empire. Not long after the Slavic incursion, Moesia was once again invaded, this time by the Bulgars under Khan Asparukh. Their horde was a remnant of Old Great Bulgaria, an extinct tribal confederacy situated north of the Black Sea in what is now Ukraine. Asparukh attacked Byzantine territories in Moesia and conquered the Slavic tribes there in 680. A peace treaty with the Byzantine Empire was signed in 681, marking the foundation of the First Bulgarian Empire. The minority Bulgars formed a close-knit ruling caste. Succeeding rulers strengthened the Bulgarian state throughout the 8th and 9th centuries. Krum introduced a written code of law and checked a major Byzantine incursion at the Battle of Pliska, in which Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus I was killed. Boris I abolished paganism in favor of Eastern Orthodox Christianity in 864. The conversion was followed by a Byzantine recognition of the Bulgarian Church and the adoption of the Cyrillic alphabet, developed in the capital, Preslav. The common language, religion and script strengthened central authority and gradually fused the Slavs and Bulgars into a unified people speaking a single Slavic language. A golden age began during the 34-year rule of Simeon the Great, who oversaw the largest territorial expansion of the state. After Simeon's death, Bulgaria was weakened by wars with Magyars and Pechenegs and the spread of the Bogomil heresy. Preslav was seized by the Byzantine army in 971 after consecutive Rus and Byzantine invasions. The empire briefly recovered from the attacks under Samuel, but this ended when Byzantine Emperor Basil II defeated the Bulgarian army at Cluj in 1014. Samuel died shortly after the battle, and by 1018 the Byzantines had conquered the First Bulgarian Empire. After the conquest, Basil II prevented revolts by retaining the rule of local nobility, integrating them in Byzantine bureaucracy and aristocracy, and relieving their lands of the obligation to pay taxes and gold, allowing tax in kind instead. The Bulgarian Patriarchate was reduced to an archbishopric, but retained its autocephalous status and its dioceses. Second Bulgarian Empire. Byzantine domestic policies changed after Basil's death and a series of unsuccessful rebellions broke out, the largest being led by Peter Delian. The empire's authority declined after a catastrophic military defeat at Manzikert against Seljuk invaders, and was further disturbed by the Crusades. This prevented Byzantine attempts at Hellenization and created fertile ground for further revolt. In 1185 Ozan dynasty nobles Ivan Ozanai and Peter IV organized a major uprising and succeeded in re-establishing the Bulgarian state. Ivan Ozan and Peter laid the foundations of the Second Bulgarian Empire with its capital at Tarnovo. Julian, the third of the Ozan monarchs, extended his dominion to Belgrade and Ohrid. He acknowledged the spiritual supremacy of the Pope and received a royal crown from a papal legate. The empire reached its zenith under Ivan Ozan II, 1218–1241, when its borders expanded as far as the coast of Albania, Serbia, and Epirus, while commerce and culture flourished. Ivan Ozan's rule was also marked by a shift away from Roman religious matters. The Ozan dynasty became extinct in 1257. Internal conflicts and incessant Byzantine and Hungarian attacks followed, enabling the Mongols to establish suzerainty over the weakened Bulgarian state. In 1277, swineherd Ivilo led a great peasant revolt that expelled the Mongols from Bulgaria and briefly made him emperor. He was overthrown in 1280 by the feudal landlords, whose factional conflicts caused the Second Bulgarian Empire to disintegrate into small feudal dominions by the 14th century. These fragmented rump states, two tsardoms at Vidin and Tarnovo and the Despotate of Dobrudza, became easy prey for a new threat arriving from the southeast, the Ottoman Turks. Ottoman rule. The Ottomans were employed as mercenaries by the Byzantines in the 1340s but later became invaders in their own right. Sultan Murad I took Adrianople from the Byzantines in 1362, Sofia fell in 1382, followed by Shumen in 1388. The Ottomans completed their conquest of Bulgarian lands in 1393 when Tarnovo was sacked after a 3-month siege and the Battle of Nicopolis, which brought about the fall of the Vidin Tsardom in 1396. Sozopol was the last Bulgarian settlement to fall, in 1453. The Bulgarian nobility was subsequently eliminated and the peasantry was enslaved to Ottoman masters, while much of the educated clergy fled to other countries. Christians were considered an inferior class of people under the Ottoman system. Bulgarians were subjected to heavy taxes, including divshurm, or blood tax, their culture was suppressed, and they experienced partial Islamization. Ottoman authorities established a religious administrative community called the Rum Millet, which governed all Orthodox Christians regardless of their ethnicity. Most of the local population then gradually lost its distinct national consciousness, identifying only by its faith. The clergy remaining in some isolated monasteries kept their ethnic identity alive, enabling its survival in remote rural areas, and in the militant Catholic community in the northwest of the country. As Ottoman power began to wane, Habsburg Austria and Russia saw Bulgarian Christians as potential allies. The Austrians first backed an uprising in Tarnovo in 1598, then a second one in 1686, the Cheprevtsi uprising in 1688 and finally Karpash's rebellion in 1689. The Russian Empire also asserted itself as a protector of Christians in Ottoman lands with the Treaty of Kuzuk-Kainarka in 1774. The Western European Enlightenment in the 18th century influenced the initiation of a national awakening of Bulgaria. It restored national consciousness and provided an ideological basis for the liberation struggle, resulting in the 1876 April Uprising. Up to 30,000 Bulgarians were killed as Ottoman authorities put down the rebellion. The massacres prompted the great powers to take action. They convened the Constantinople Conference in 1876, but their decisions were rejected by the Ottomans. This allowed the Russian Empire to seek a military solution without risking confrontation with other great powers, as had happened in the Crimean War. In 1877 Russia declared war on the Ottomans and defeated them with the help of Bulgarian rebels, particularly during the crucial Battle of Shipka Pass, which secured Russian control over the main road to Constantinople. Third Bulgarian state. The Treaty of San Stefano was signed on March 3, 1878 by Russia and the Ottoman Empire. It was to set up an autonomous Bulgarian principality spanning Mysia, Macedonia, and Thrace, roughly on the territories of the Second Bulgarian Empire, and this day is now a public holiday called National Liberation Day. The other great powers immediately rejected the treaty out of fear that such a large country in the Balkans might threaten their interests. It was superseded by the Treaty of Berlin, signed on 13 July, which provided for a much smaller state only comprising Mysia and the region of Sofia, leaving large populations of ethnic Bulgarians outside the new country. This significantly contributed to Bulgaria's militaristic foreign affairs approach during the first half of the 20th century. The Bulgarian Principality won a war against Serbia and incorporated the semi-autonomous Ottoman territory of Eastern Rumelia in 1885, proclaiming itself an independent state on October 5, 1908. In the years following independence, Bulgaria increasingly militarized and was often referred to as the Balkan Prussia. It became involved in 3 consecutive conflicts between 1912 and 1918, 2 Balkan Wars and World War I. After a disastrous defeat in the Second Balkan War, Bulgaria again found itself fighting on the losing side as a result of its alliance with the Central Powers in World War I. Despite fielding more than a quarter of its population in a 1,200,000 strong army and achieving several decisive victories at Doiran and Monastir, the country capitulated in 1918. The war resulted in significant territorial losses and a total of 87,500 soldiers killed. More than 253,000 refugees from the lost territories immigrated to Bulgaria from 1912 to 1929, placing additional strain on the already ruined national economy. The resulting political unrest led to the establishment of a royal authoritarian dictatorship by Tsar Boris III, 1918 to 1943. Bulgaria entered World War II in 1941 as a member of the Axis but declined to participate in Operation Barbarossa and saved its Jewish population from deportation to concentration camps. The sudden death of Boris III in mid-1943 pushed the country into political turmoil as the war turned against Germany, and the communist guerrilla movement gained momentum. The government of Bogdan Filov subsequently failed to achieve peace with the Allies. Bulgaria did not comply with Soviet demands to expel German forces from its territory, resulting in a declaration of war and an invasion by the USSR in September 1944. The communist-dominated Fatherland Front took power, ended participation in the Axis and joined the Allied side until the war ended. Bulgaria suffered little war damage and the Soviet Union demanded no reparations. But all wartime gains, with the notable exception of southern Dobruja, were lost. The left-wing uprising of September 9, 1944 led to the abolition of the monarchy and the executions of some 1,000 to 3,000 dissidents, war criminals, and members of the former royal elite. But it was not until 1946 that a one-party People's Republic was instituted following a referendum. It fell into the Soviet sphere of influence under the leadership of Georgy Dimitrov, 1946 to 1949, who established a repressive, rapidly industrializing Stalinist state. By the mid-1950s, standards of living rose significantly and political repression ceased. The Soviet-style planned economy saw some market-oriented policies emerging on an experimental level under Todor Zhivkov, 1954 to 1989. Compared to wartime levels, national GDP increased fivefold and per capita GDP quadrupled by the 1980s, although severe debt spikes took place in 1960, 1977 and 1980. Zhivkov's daughter Ludmila bolstered national pride by promoting Bulgarian heritage, culture and arts worldwide. Facing declining birth rates among the ethnic Bulgarian majority, in 1984 Zhivkov's government forced the minority ethnic Turks to adopt Slavic names in an attempt to erase their identity and assimilate them. These policies resulted in the emigration of some 300,000 ethnic Turks to Turkey. The Communist Party was forced to give up its political monopoly on November 10, 1989 under the influence of the revolutions of 1989. Zhivkov resigned and Bulgaria embarked on a transition to a parliamentary democracy. The first free elections in June 1990 were won by the Communist Party, now rebranded as the Bulgarian Socialist Party. A new constitution that provided for a relatively weak elected president and for a prime minister accountable to the legislature was adopted in July 1991. The new system initially failed to improve living standards or create economic growth. The average quality of life and economic performance remained lower than under communism well into the early 2000s. After 2001, economic, political and geopolitical conditions improved greatly, and Bulgaria achieved high human development status in 2003. It became a member of NATO in 2004 and participated in the war in Afghanistan. After several years of reforms, it joined the European Union and single market in 2007 despite Brussels' concerns about government corruption. Bulgaria hosted the 2018 presidency of the Council of the European Union at the National Palace of Culture in Sofia. Geography. Bulgaria occupies a portion of the Eastern Balkan Peninsula, bordering 5 countries, Greece and Turkey to the south, Macedonia and Serbia to the west, and Romania to the north. The land borders have a total length of 1,808 kilometers, 1,123 miles, and the coastline has a length of 354 kilometers, 220 miles. Its total area of 110,994 square kilometers, 42,855 square miles, ranks it as the world's 105th largest country. Bulgaria's geographic coordinates are 43 degrees north, 25 degrees east. The most notable topographical features are the Danubian Plain, the Balkan Mountains, the Thracian Plain, and the Rila-Rhodope Massif. The southern edge of the Danubian Plain slopes upward into the foothills of the Balkans, while the Danube defines the border with Romania. The Thracian Plain is roughly triangular, beginning southeast of Sofia and broadening as it reaches the Black Sea coast. The Balkan Mountains run laterally through the middle of the country from west to east. The mountainous southwest has two distinct alpine-type ranges, Rila and Pirin, which border the lower but more extensive Rhodope Mountains to the east, various medium-altitude mountains to west, northwest and south, Vitasha, Osalkovo, Vlahina, Belasica, Slavyanka, etc. Musala, at 2,925 meters, 9,596 feet, is the highest point in both Bulgaria and the Balkan Peninsula, and the Black Sea coast is the country's lowest point. Plains occupy about one-third of the territory, while plateaus and hills occupy 41%. Most rivers are short and with low water levels. The longest river located solely in Bulgarian territory, the Iskar, has a length of 368 kilometers, 229 miles. Other major rivers include Struma and Maritsa in the south. Bulgaria has a varied and changeable climate, which results from being positioned at the meeting point of the Mediterranean, oceanic and continental air masses combined with the barrier effect of its mountains. Northern Bulgaria averages 1 degree Celsius, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler, and registers 200 millimeters, 7.9 in, more precipitation, than the regions south of the Balkan Mountains. Temperature amplitudes vary significantly in different areas. The lowest recorded temperature is -38.3 degrees Celsius, -36.9 degrees Fahrenheit, while the highest is 45.2 degrees Celsius, 113.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation averages about 630 millimeters, 24.8 in, per year, and varies from 500 millimeters, 19.7 in Dobruja to more than 2,500 millimeters, 98.4 in the mountains. Continental air masses bring significant amounts of snowfall during winter. Biodiversity and environment. The interaction of climatic, hydrological, geological and topographical conditions has produced a relatively wide variety of plant and animal species. Bulgaria's biodiversity, one of the richest in Europe, is conserved in 3 national parks, 11 nature parks, 10 biosphere reserves and 565 protected areas. 93 of the 233 mammal species of Europe are found in Bulgaria, along with 49% of butterfly and 30% of vascular plant species. Overall, 41,493 plant and animal species are present. Larger mammals with sizable populations include deer, 106,323 individuals, wild boars, 88,948, jackals, 47,293, and foxes, 32,326. Partridges number some 328,000 individuals, making them the most widespread game bird. A third of all nesting birds in Bulgaria can be found in Rila National Park, which also hosts Arctic and alpine species at high altitudes. Flora includes more than 3,800 vascular plant species, of which 170 are endemic and 150 are considered endangered. A checklist of larger fungi in Bulgaria by the Institute of Botany identifies more than 1,500 species. More than 35% of the land area is covered by forests. In 1998, the Bulgarian government adopted the National Biological Diversity Conservation Strategy, a comprehensive program seeking the preservation of local ecosystems, protection of endangered species and conservation of genetic resources. Bulgaria has some of the largest Natura 2000 areas in Europe, covering 33.8% of its territory. It also achieved its Kyoto Protocol objective of reducing carbon dioxide emissions by 30% from 1990 to 2009. Bulgaria ranks 30th in the 2018 Environmental Performance Index, but scores low on air quality. Particulate levels are the highest in Europe, especially in urban areas affected by automobile traffic and coal-based power stations. One of these, the lignite-fired Maritsa Istok 2 station, is causing the highest damage to health and the environment in the European Union. Pesticide use in agriculture and antiquated industrial sewage systems produce extensive soil and water pollution. Water quality began to improve in 1998 and has maintained a trend of moderate improvement. Over 75% of surface rivers meet European standards for good quality. Politics. Bulgaria is a parliamentary democracy where the Prime Minister is the head of government and the most powerful executive position. The political system has 3 branches: legislative, executive and judicial, with universal suffrage for citizens at least 18 years old. The constitution also provides possibilities of direct democracy, namely petitions in national referenda. Elections are supervised by an independent Central Election Commission that includes members from all major political parties. Parties must register with the commission prior to participating in a national election. Normally, the Prime Minister-elect is the leader of the party receiving the most votes in parliamentary elections, although this is not always the case. Unlike the Prime Minister, presidential domestic power is more limited. The directly elected president serves as head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and has the authority to return a bill for further debate, although the parliament can override the presidential veto by a simple majority vote. Political parties gather in the National Assembly, a body of 240 deputies elected to 4-year terms by direct popular vote. The National Assembly has the power to enact laws, approve the budget, schedule presidential elections, select and dismiss the Prime Minister and other ministers, declare war, deploy troops abroad, and ratify international treaties and agreements. Overall, Bulgaria displays a pattern of unstable governments. Boyko Borisov is serving his third term as Prime Minister since 2009, when his center-right, pro-EU party GERB won the general election and ruled as a minority government with 117 seats in the National Assembly. His first government resigned on February 20, 2013 after nationwide protests caused by high costs of utilities, low living standards, corruption and the perceived failure of the democratic system. The protest wave was notable for self-immolations, spontaneous demonstrations and a strong sentiment against political parties. The subsequent snap elections in May resulted in a narrow win for GERB, but the Bulgarian Socialist Party eventually formed a government led by Plamen Oresharski after Borisov failed to secure parliamentary support. The Oresharski government resigned in July 2014 amid continuing large-scale protests. A caretaker government took over and called the October 2014 elections, which resulted in a third GERB victory, but a total of 8 parties entered parliament. Borisov formed a coalition with several right-wing parties, but resigned again after the candidate backed by his party failed to win the 2016 presidential election. The March 2017 snap election was again won by GERB, but with 95 seats in parliament. They formed a coalition with the far-right United Patriots, who hold 27 seats. Freedom House has reported a continuing deterioration of democratic governance after 2009, citing reduced media independence, stalled reforms, abuse of authority at the highest level and increased dependence of local administrations on the central government. Bulgaria is still listed as free, with a political system designated as a semi-consolidated democracy, albeit with deteriorating scores. The Democracy Index defines it as a flawed democracy. Legal system. Bulgaria has a civil law legal system. The judiciary is overseen by the Ministry of Justice. The Supreme Administrative Court and the Supreme Court of Cassation are the highest courts of appeal and oversee the application of laws in subordinate courts. The Supreme Judicial Council manages the system and appoints judges. The legal system is regarded by both domestic and international observers as one of Europe's most inefficient due to pervasive lack of transparency and corruption. Law enforcement is carried out by organizations mainly subordinate to the Ministry of the Interior. The General Directorate of National Police, GDNP, combats general crime and maintains public order. GDNP fields 26,578 police officers in its local and national sections. The bulk of criminal cases are transport-related, followed by theft and drug-related crime. Homicide rates are low. The Ministry of the Interior also heads the Border Police Service and the National Gendarmerie, a specialized branch for anti-terrorist activity, crisis management and riot control. Counterintelligence and national security are the responsibility of the State Agency for National Security. Administrative divisions. Bulgaria is a unitary state. Since the 1880s, the number of territorial management units has varied from 7 to 26. Between 1987 and 1999, the administrative structure consisted of 9 provinces, oblasti, singular oblast. A new administrative structure was adopted in parallel with the decentralization of the economic system. It includes 27 provinces and a metropolitan capital province, Sofia Grad. All areas take their names from their respective capital cities. The provinces are subdivided into 265 municipalities. Municipalities are run by mayors, who are elected to 4-year terms, and by directly elected municipal councils. Bulgaria is a highly centralized state where the Council of Ministers directly appoints regional governors, and all provinces and municipalities are heavily dependent on it for funding. Foreign relations and security. Bulgaria became a member of the United Nations in 1955 and since 1966 has been a non-permanent member of the Security Council 3 times, most recently from 2002 to 2003. It was also among the founding nations of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, in 1975. Euro-Atlantic integration has been a priority since the fall of communism, although the communist leadership also had aspirations of leaving the Warsaw Pact and joining the European communities by 1987. Bulgaria signed the European Union Treaty of Accession on April 25, 2005, and became a full member of the European Union on January 1, 2007. In addition, it has a tripartite economic and diplomatic collaboration with Romania and Greece, good ties with China and Vietnam, and a historical relationship with Russia. Bulgaria deployed significant numbers of both civilian and military advisors in Soviet-allied countries like Nicaragua and Libya during the Cold War. The first deployment of foreign troops on Bulgarian soil since World War II occurred in 2001, when the country hosted 6 KC-135 Stratotanker aircraft and 200 support personnel for the war effort in Afghanistan. International military relations were further expanded with accession to NATO in March 2004 and the U.S.-Bulgarian Defense Cooperation Agreement signed in April 2006. Vesmir and Grofignaševo air bases, the Novoselo training range, and a logistics center in Idos subsequently became joint military training facilities cooperatively used by the United States and Bulgarian militaries. Domestic defense is the responsibility of the all-volunteer Bulgarian Armed Forces, composed of land forces, navy and an air force. The land forces consist of 2 mechanized brigades and 8 independent regiments and battalions. The Air Force operates 106 aircraft and air defense systems in 6 air bases, and the Navy operates various ships, helicopters and coastal defense weapons. Active troops dwindled from 152,000 in 1988 to 31,300 in 2017, supplemented by 3,000 reservists and 16,000 paramilitary. The inventory consists mostly of Soviet equipment like Mikoyan MiG-29 and Sukhoi Su-25 jets, S-300 Pints air defense systems and SS-21 Scarab short-range ballistic missiles. Economy. Bulgaria has an open, upper-middle income range market economy where the private sector accounts for more than 70% of GDP. From a largely agricultural country with a predominantly rural population in 1948, by the 1980s Bulgaria had transformed into an industrial economy with scientific and technological research at the top of its budgetary expenditure priorities. The loss of Comecon markets in 1990 and the subsequent shock therapy of the planned system caused a steep decline in industrial and agricultural production, ultimately followed by an economic collapse in 1997. The economy largely recovered during a period of rapid growth several years later, but the average salary of 1,036 leva, $615 per month remains the lowest in the EU. More than a fifth of the labor force are employed on a minimum wage of $1.16 per hour. A balanced budget was achieved in 2003 and the country began running a surplus the following year. Expenditures amounted to $21.15 billion and revenues were $21.67 billion in 2017. Most government spending on institutions is earmarked for security. The Ministries of Defense, the Interior and Justice are allocated the largest share of the annual government budget, whereas those responsible for the environment, tourism and energy receive the least amount of funding. Taxes form the bulk of government revenue at 30% of GDP. Bulgaria has some of the lowest corporate income tax rates in the EU at a flat 10% rate. The tax system is 2-tier. Value-added tax, excise duties, corporate and personal income tax are national, whereas real estate, inheritance, and vehicle taxes are levied by local authorities. Strong economic performance in the early 2000s reduced government debt from 79.6% in 1998 to 14.1% in 2008. It has since increased to 28.7% of GDP by 2016, but remains the 3rd lowest in the EU. The Yugoslav planning area is the most developed region with a per capita gross domestic product, PPP, of $26,580 in 2016. It includes the capital city and the surrounding Sofia province, which alone generate 42% of national gross domestic product despite hosting only 22% of the population. PPP GDP per capita and the cost of living in 2017 stood at 49 and 48.4% of the EU average, respectively. National PPP GDP was estimated at $143.1 billion in 2016, with a per capita value of $20,116. Economic growth statistics take into account illegal transactions from the informal economy, which is the largest in the EU as a percentage of economic output. The Bulgarian National Bank issues the national currency, lev, which is pegged to the euro at a rate of 1.95583 lev per euro. After several consecutive years of high growth, repercussions of the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 resulted in a 3.6% contraction of GDP in 2009 and increased unemployment. Industrial output declined 10%, mining by 31%, and ferrous and metal production marked a 60% drop. Positive growth was restored in 2010, but intercompany debt exceeded $59 billion, meaning that 60% of all Bulgarian companies were mutually indebted. By 2012, it had increased to $97 billion, or 227% of GDP. The government implemented strict austerity measures with IMF and EU encouragement to some positive fiscal results, but the social consequences of these measures, such as increased income inequality and accelerated outward migration, have been catastrophic according to the International Trade Union Confederation. Siphoning of public funds to the families and relatives of politicians from incumbent parties has resulted in fiscal and welfare losses to society. Bulgaria ranks 71st in the Corruption Perceptions Index and experiences the worst levels of corruption in the European Union, a phenomenon that remains a source of profound public discontent. Along with organized crime, corruption has resulted in a rejection of the country's Schengen area application and withdrawal of foreign investment. Government officials reportedly engage in embezzlement, influence trading, government procurement violations and bribery with impunity. Government procurement in particular is a critical area in corruption risk. An estimated 10 billion leva, $5.99 billion, of state budget and European cohesion funds are spent on public tenders each year. Nearly 14 billion. $8.38 billion, were spent on public contracts in 2017 alone. A large share of these contracts are awarded to a few politically connected companies amid widespread irregularities, procedure violations and tailor-made award criteria. Despite repeated criticism from the European Commission, EU institutions refrain from taking measures against Bulgaria because it supports Brussels on a number of issues, unlike Poland or Hungary. Sectors. The labor force is 3.36 million people, of whom 6.8% are employed in agriculture, 26.6% in industry and 66.6% in the services sector. Extraction of metals and minerals, production of chemicals, machine building, steel, biotechnology, tobacco and food processing and petroleum refining are among the major industrial activities. Mining alone employs 24,000 people and generates about 5% of the country's GDP. The number of employed in all mining-related industries is 120,000. Bulgaria is Europe's fifth largest coal producer. Local deposits of coal, iron, copper and lead are vital for the manufacturing and energy sectors. Two-thirds of food and agricultural exports go to OECD countries. Although cereal and vegetable output dropped by 40% between 1990 and 2008, output has since increased, and the 2016 to 2017 season registered the biggest grain output in a decade. Maize, barley, oats and rice are also grown. Quality Oriental tobacco is a significant industrial crop. Bulgaria is also the largest producer globally of lavender and rose oil, both widely used in fragrances. Of the services sector, tourism is a significant contributor to economic growth. Bulgaria has emerged as a traveling destination with its inexpensive resorts and beaches outside the reach of the tourist industry. Most of the visitors are Romanian, German, Turkish, British, and Russian. Sofia, Plovdiv, Veliko Tarnovo, coastal resorts Golden Sands and Sunny Beach and winter resorts Bansko, Pamporovo and Borovets are some of the locations most visited by tourists. Science and technology. Spending on research and development amounts to 0.78% of GDP, and the bulk of public R&D funding goes to the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, BAS. Private businesses accounted for more than 73% of R&D expenditures and employed 42% of Bulgaria's 22,000 researchers in 2015. The same year, Bulgaria ranked 39th out of 50 countries in the Bloomberg Innovation Index, the highest score being in education, 24th, and the lowest in value-added manufacturing, 48th. Chronic government underinvestment in research since 1990 has forced many professionals in science and engineering to leave Bulgaria. Despite the lack of funding, research in chemistry, materials science and physics remains strong. Antarctic research is actively carried out through the St. Clement Ordsky base on Livingston Island in western Antarctica. The Information and Communication Technologies (ICT) sector generates 3% of economic output and employs 40,000 to 51,000 software engineers. Bulgaria was known as a communist Silicon Valley during the Soviet era due to its key role in computing technology production. The country is a regional leader in high-performance computing. It operates Avitohol, the most powerful supercomputer in Southeast Europe, and will host one of the 8 petascale Euro HPC supercomputers. Bulgaria has made numerous contributions to space exploration. These include 2 scientific satellites, more than 200 payloads and 300 experiments in Earth orbit, as well as 2 cosmonauts since 1971. Bulgaria was the first country to grow wheat and vegetables in space with its Svet greenhouses on the Mir space station. It was involved in the development of the Granat Gamma Ray Observatory and the Vega program, particularly in modeling trajectories and guidance algorithms for both Vega probes. Bulgarian instruments have been used in the exploration of Mars, including a spectrometer that took the first high-quality spectroscopic images of Martian moon Phobos with the Phobos 2 probe. Cosmic radiation en route to and around the planet has been mapped by LULAN-ML dosimeters on the ExoMars TGO. Variants of these instruments have also been fitted on the International Space Station and the Chandrayaan-1 lunar probe. Another lunar mission, SpaceEels Bershit, was also equipped with a Bulgarian-manufactured imaging payload. Bulgaria's first geostationary communications satellite, BulgariaSat-1, was launched by SpaceX in June 2017. Infrastructure. Telephone services are widely available, and a central digital trunk line connects most regions. Vivacom, VTC, serves more than 90% of fixed lines and is one of the 3 operators providing mobile services, along with A1 and Telenor. Internet penetration stood at 61.9% of the population aged 16 to 74, in 2017. Bulgaria's strategic geographic location and well-developed energy sector make it a key European energy center despite its lack of significant fossil fuel deposits. Thermal power plants generate 48.9% of electricity, followed by nuclear power from the Kozloduy reactors, 34.8%, and renewable sources, 16.3%. Equipment for a second nuclear power station at bʌlânė has been acquired, but the fate of the project remains uncertain. Installed capacity amounts to 12,668 megawatts, allowing Bulgaria to exceed domestic demand and export energy. The national road network has a total length of 19,512 kilometers, 12,124 miles, of which 19,235 kilometers, 11,952 miles, are paved. Railroads are a major mode of freight transportation, although highways carry a progressively larger share of freight. Bulgaria has 6,238 kilometers, 3,876 miles, of railway track and currently a total of 81 kilometers, 50 miles, of high-speed lines are in operation. Rail links are available with Romania, Turkey, Greece, and Serbia, and express trains serve direct routes to Kiev, Minsk, Moscow, and St. Petersburg. Sofia and Plovdiv are the country's air travel hubs, while Varna and Burgas are the principal maritime trade ports. Demographics. The population of Bulgaria is 7,360,000 people according to the 2011 national census. The majority of the population, 72.5%, reside in urban areas. As of 2017, Sofia is the most populated urban center with 1,330,000 people, followed by Plovdiv, 345,000, Varna, 344,000, Burgas, 209,000, and Rus, 160,000. Bulgarians are the main ethnic group and comprise 84.8% of the population. Turkish and Roma minorities comprise 8.8 and 4.9%, respectively, Some 40 smaller minorities comprise 0.7%, and 0.8% do not self-identify with an ethnic group. Former statistics head Renata Injova has disputed the 2011 census figures, suggesting the actual population is smaller than reported. The Roma minority is usually underestimated in census data and may represent up to 11% of the population. Population density is 65 per square kilometer, almost half the European Union average. In 2017, the average total fertility rate, TFR, across Bulgaria was 1.56 children per woman, below the replacement rate of 2.1. It remains considerably below the high of 5.83 children per woman in 1905. Bulgaria subsequently has one of the oldest populations in the world, with the average age of 43 years. Bulgaria is in a state of demographic crisis. It has had negative population growth since the early 1990s, when the economic collapse caused a long-lasting emigration wave. Some 937,000 to 1,200,000 people, mostly young adults, left the country by 2005. The majority of children are born to unmarried women. Furthermore, a third of all households consist of only one person and 75.5% of families do not have children under the age of 16. The resulting birth rates are among the lowest in the world while death rates are among the highest. High death rates result from a combination of an aging population, a high number of people at risk of poverty, and a weak healthcare system. More than 80% of all deaths are due to cancer and cardiovascular conditions, nearly a fifth of those are avoidable. Mortality rates can be sharply reduced to levels below the EU average through timely and adequate access to medical services, which the healthcare system does not provide fully. Although healthcare in Bulgaria is nominally universal, out-of-pocket expenses account for nearly half of all healthcare spending, which significantly limits access to medical care. Other problems disrupting care provision are the emigration of doctors due to low wages, understaffed and under-equipped regional hospitals, supply shortages, and frequent changes to the basic service package for those insured. The 2018 Bloomberg Healthcare Efficiency Index ranked Bulgaria last out of 56 countries. Average life expectancy is 74.7 years compared with an EU average of 80.2 and a world average of 69. Public expenditures for education are far below the European Union average as well. Educational standards were once high, but have declined significantly since the early 2000s. Bulgarian students were among the highest scoring in the world in terms of reading in 2001, performing better than their Canadian and German counterparts. By 2006, scores in reading, math and science had dropped. Although average literacy stands at 98.4% with no significant difference between sexes, functional illiteracy is significant. The PISA study of 2015 found 41.5% of pupils in the 9th grade to be functionally illiterate in reading, maths and science. The Ministry of Education and Science partially funds public schools, colleges and universities, sets criteria for textbooks and oversees the publishing process. Education in primary and secondary public schools is free and compulsory. The process spans through 12 grades, where grades 1 through 8 are primary and 9 through 12 are secondary level. Higher education consists of a 4-year bachelor degree and a 1-year master's degree. Bulgaria's highest-ranked higher education institution is Sofia University. Bulgarian is the only language with official status and native for 85% of the population. It belongs to the Slavic group of languages, but it has a number of grammatical peculiarities, shared with its closest relative Macedonian, that set it apart from other Slavic languages. These include a complex verbal morphology, which also codes for distinctions in evidentiality, the absence of noun cases and infinitives, and the use of a suffix definite article. Other major languages are Turkish and Romani, which according to the 2011 census were spoken natively by 9.1% and 4.2% respectively. The country scores high in gender equality, ranking 18th in the 2018 Global Gender Gap Report. Although women's suffrage was enabled relatively late, in 1937, women today have equal political rights, high workforce participation and legally mandated equal pay. Bulgaria has the highest ratio of female ICT researchers in the EU, as well as the second highest ratio of females in the technology sector at 44.6% of the workforce. High levels of female participation are a legacy of the socialist era. Religion. More than 3/4 of Bulgarians subscribe to Eastern Orthodoxy. Sunni Muslims are the second largest religious community and constitute 10% of Bulgaria's overall religious makeup, although a majority of them are not observant and find the use of Islamic veils in schools unacceptable. Less than 3% of the population are affiliated with other religions and 11.8% are irreligious or do not self-identify with a religion. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church gained autocephalous status in AD 927, and has 12 dioceses and over 2,000 priests. Bulgaria is a secular state with guaranteed religious freedom by constitution, but Orthodoxy is designated as a traditional religion. Culture. Contemporary Bulgarian culture blends the formal culture that helped forge a national consciousness towards the end of Ottoman rule with millennia-old folk traditions. An essential element of Bulgarian folklore is fire, used to banish evil spirits and illnesses. Many of these are personified as witches, whereas other creatures like Smay and Samodiva, Vila, are either benevolent guardians or ambivalent tricksters. Some rituals against evil spirits have survived and are still practiced, most notably kukri and servikari. Martinitsa is also widely celebrated. Nestinarstvo, a ritual fire dance of Thracian origin, is included in the list of UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. 9 historical and natural objects are UNESCO World Heritage Sites: Pirin National Park, Serberna Nature Reserve, the Madara Rider, the Thracian tombs in Speshtari and Kazanlik, the Rila Monastery, the Boyana Church, the rock-hewn churches of Ivanova and the ancient city of Nisipur. The Rila Monastery was established by Saint John of Rila, Bulgaria's patron saint, whose life has been the subject of numerous literary accounts since medieval times. The establishment of the Preslav and Ohrid literary schools in the 10th century is associated with a golden period in Bulgarian literature during the Middle Ages. The school's emphasis on Christian scriptures made the Bulgarian Empire a center of Slavic culture, bringing Slavs under the influence of Christianity and providing them with a written language. Its alphabet, Cyrillic script, was developed by the Preslav Literary School. The Tarnava Literary School, on the other hand, is associated with a Silver Age of literature defined by high-quality manuscripts on historical or mystical themes under the Ozan and Shishman dynasties. Many literary and artistic masterpieces were destroyed by the Ottoman conquerors, and artistic activities did not re-emerge until the national revival in the 19th century. The enormous body of work of Ivan Vazov, 1850–1921, covered every genre and touched upon every facet of Bulgarian society, bridging pre-liberation works with literature of the newly established state. Notable later works are Begonyo by Aleko Konstantinov, the Nietzschean poetry of Pencho Slavikov, the symbolist poetry of Peo Yevrov and Dimcho Debalyanov, the Marxist-inspired works of Geomilov and Nikolai Vapsarov, and the socialist realism novels of Dimitar Dimov and Dimitar Talov. Zvitan Todorov is a notable contemporary author, while Bulgarian-born Elias Canetti was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1981. Religious visual arts heritage includes frescoes, murals and icons, many produced by the medieval Tarnovo Artistic School. Like literature, it was not until the national revival when Bulgarian visual arts began to re-emerge. Zahari Zograf was a pioneer of the visual arts in the pre-liberation era. After the liberation, Ivan Merkvichka, Anton Mitov, Vladimir Dimitrov, Zonko Lavrenov and Zlatyu Boyagiev introduced newer styles and substance, depicting scenery from Bulgarian villages, old towns and historical subjects. Christo is the most famous Bulgarian artist of the 21st century, known for his outdoor installations. Folk music is by far the most extensive traditional art and has slowly developed throughout the ages as a fusion of Far Eastern, Oriental, Medieval Eastern Orthodox and Standard Western European tonalities and modes. Bulgarian folk music has a distinctive sound and uses a wide range of traditional instruments, such as gadulka, gaida, kaval and tupan. A distinguishing feature is extended rhythmical time, which has no equivalent in the rest of European music. The state television female vocal choir won a Grammy Award in 1990 for its performances of Bulgarian folk music. Written musical composition can be traced back to the works of Ioan Căcuzel, circa 1280 to 1360, but modern classical music began with Emanuel Manilov, who composed the first Bulgarian opera in 1890. Pancho Vladagarev and Petko Stanov further enriched symphony, ballet and opera, which singers Gena Dimitrova, Boris Christoph, Liu Bawelic and Nikolai Gyaurov elevated to a world-class level. Bulgarian performers have gained acclaim in other genres like electropop, Mira Aoyo, jazz, Milcho Leviev, and blends of jazz and folk, Ivo Popasov. The Bulgarian National Radio, BTV and daily newspapers Trud, Dnevnik and 24 Chasa are some of the largest national media outlets. Bulgarian media were described as generally unbiased in their reporting in the early 2000s, and print media had no legal restrictions. Since then, freedom of the press has deteriorated to the point where Bulgaria scores 111th globally in the World Press Freedom Index, lower than all European Union members and membership candidate states. The government has diverted EU funds to sympathetic media outlets and bribed others to be less critical on problematic topics, while attacks against individual journalists have increased. Collusion between politicians, oligarchs and the media is widespread. Bulgarian cuisine is similar to that of other Balkan countries and demonstrates strong Turkish and Greek influences. Yogurt, lukanka, panica, shopska salad, litanica and kozanak are among the best-known local foods. Meat consumption is lower than the European average, given a cultural preference for a large variety of salads. Bulgaria was the world's second-largest wine exporter until 1989, but has since lost that position. The 2016 harvest yielded 128 million liters of wine, of which 62 million was exported mainly to Romania, Poland, and Russia. Mavrud, Rubin, Shiroka Melnishka, Demiat and Cherven Misket are the typical grapes used in Bulgarian wine. Rakia is a traditional fruit brandy that was consumed in Bulgaria as early as the 14th century. Sports. Bulgaria appeared at the first modern Olympic Games in 1896, when it was represented by gymnast Charles Champod. Since then, Bulgarian athletes have won 52 gold, 89 silver, and 83 bronze medals, ranking 25th in the all-time medal table. Weightlifting is a signature sport of Bulgaria. Coach Ivan Abadziev developed innovative training practices that have produced many Bulgarian world and Olympic champions in weightlifting since the 1980s. Bulgarian athletes have also excelled in wrestling, boxing, gymnastics, volleyball and tennis. Stefka Kostadinova is the reigning world record holder in the women's high jump at 2.09 meters, 6 feet 10 inches, achieved during the 1987 World Championships. Grigor Dimitrov is the first Bulgarian tennis player in the top 3 ATP rankings. Football is the most popular sport in the country by a substantial margin. The national football team's best performance was a semi-final at the 1994 FIFA World Cup, when the squad was spearheaded by forward Hristo Stoichkov. Stoichkov is the most successful Bulgarian player of all time. He was awarded the Golden Boot and the Golden Ball and was considered one of the best in the world while playing for FC Barcelona in the 1990s. CSKA and Levski, both based in Sofia, are the most successful clubs domestically and long-standing rivals. Ludogorets is remarkable for having advanced from the local 4th division to the 2014-15 UEFA Champions League group stage in a mere 9 years. Placed 39th in 2018, it is Bulgaria's highest-ranked club in UEFA. 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 It is Bulgaria's highest